question is whether you can make words mean so many different things.
Well, hello everyone. I hope you are having a good day. I wanted to bring this hopefully, short video to you regarding a campaign video that had been put out by Kamala Harris. Now, I realize by the time this comes out, the election decisions may have already been made, and we will know which of the awful choices are now ruling us, right? But this really doesn't have anything particularly to do with the campaign, which is why I wasn't in a rush to make it prior to election day. It would be relevant in any case, though it will make it a bit more poignant if the Harris ticket, and that's in fact what it is, the Harris ticket, Biden is basically weekend at Bernie's as far as this ticket is concerned.
This fall, get ready for a presidential candidate unlike any other.
I think we're good.
If that is actually the triumphant, ticket in this race, this will just become even more poignant. And there's two reasons for me wanting to cover the campaign video, and it is the one where Kamala Harris was speaking about equality and equity. The first reason I had wanted to address it is I first saw it on some right-wing channel. I can't remember which one. A bunch of them played it. And when it was played, while I was watching it, there was part of it that made me pull up a little short because it was in contradiction to the rest of it. So I was wondering, is it just poorly worded? Is it just incoherent? Did I misunderstand? And what made me even question myself more is because the conservative host that was critiquing the video, or critiquing isn't even the right word, that was using it to critique Ms. Harris more appropriately, didn't even mention that weird, what I would call like a hiccup in logic of the video or in the argument of the video. And that bothered me because when there is something that doesn't match, when there is like a one of these things is not like the other situation, you should either step back and address it, to show that you acknowledged it. Otherwise, it really does seem like you were looking for an argument that would basically come to a predetermined conclusion, that you didn't, as Sam Harris likes to say, strong man your opposition. You didn't view it in the most critical light to your own conclusion possible, that way anticipating potential objections in order to support your conclusion. So I thought maybe it was just me. And I kind of put it on my head a little bit because I really wasn't dealing so much with their campaign, or really the Trump campaign at that time, because I'm a libertarian. I'm a Joe Jorgensen supporter. Basically, when people had asked me my opinion between those two, I'm like, that's like asking me which rancid turd is slightly less rancid than the other one. In any case, I was watching then, and before people like get all up in my grill about what I watch, because I understand the hall monitors are out and full. Stand back, Karen. I don't have a manager. I watch all views on YouTube or BitChute or wherever I can find them, except what I really don't watch is libertarian content. I don't want to be in an echo chamber. So I watch everything from the very far left to the very far right. And you'll see me referencing all of those sources. Do not take my reference of a source as me being a fan or not a fan. When I want to praise or criticize, you will not need to assume, because I will tell you. So on election night, I had a Trump supporter stream up and a Biden Harris or Harris, as I say, supporter stream up. And those two streams were Sargon and Jimmy Snow. Two shows that I'm very familiar with. And I think we could both agree that they're pretty opposite. Sargon started much earlier. Like, he had a marathon. I don't know how he did that. But on his stream, the Kamala Harris video was brought up. And to his credit, I didn't watch the whole stream. That isn't to his credit. The problem, maybe that is to his credit. But to his credit, he did bring on someone representing an opposing view, which is another YouTuber named Destiny, to represent the left. And in discussing that video, Destiny immediately hopped on the hiccup that I saw that might indicate that the right-wing interpretation of the video was wrong. Though Destiny did the opposite, where he only seized upon that hiccup and then didn't deal with the rest of the evidence. So it was like two sides of the same coin. With all that in mind, I intend to address this video, hopefully bringing the best of both worlds, where I want to address, that one incongruity, and to support where I said I do think ultimately the conservative criticism was correct. It just wasn't complete, perhaps. It wasn't as fair as it could have been in acknowledging that one little strange part of the video. So my motivation to finally addressing it was, in fact, me first seeing, and I think it was a channel called The Actual Justice Warrior, but don't come for me, bro, because this is going from memory. But it was definitely the Sargon Destiny exchange, where they both were a fail, as far as I'm concerned, on that. That inspired me to want to address this now. What I plan to do is play the video all the way through first. It's only 50 seconds, I think 51 seconds, because I want the whole context to be heard. And if you haven't seen it before, or even if you had, now that you know that I had a little part in there that's like, what? Wait, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. If you didn't have that same reaction the first time you had seen it before, hopefully you'll see it this time. And if this is your first time, hopefully you will now. Now that I've asked you to look for it, you probably will. But I'm hoping everyone would have done that even without me. So let's take a view, listen, or whatever we want to call it, to this. And then we'll take it piece by piece just to talk about the issues brought up. All right, here we go.
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests, everyone should get the same amount. The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place. So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started out back there and I started out over here, we can get the same amount, but you're still gonna be that far back behind me. It's about giving people the resources and the support they need so that everyone can be on equal footing and then compete on equal footing. Equitable treatment means we all end up at the same place.
Okay. Hopefully you saw it. If not, we're going to discuss this together. It's amazing to me how horrific dystopia can be dressed up in such pretty words. Hopefully that's amazing to you too. There used to be a saying that went something like this in the church circles that I used to run with. And when I say used to, it's not that I'm still Christian. It's just hanging around those sorts of circles used to be a much bigger part of my life. a few years ago. But the saying was, when the devil comes, or when I don't mean like literally, but basically to boil down, it said the devil doesn't show up wearing a red suit and a pitchfork. The devil doesn't show up looking like the devil. The devil will show up looking like George Clooney or something, the handsome devil, right? So it shouldn't surprise me that horror gets dressed up in something very pretty. Another analogy comes to mind, which is the skin of the truth stuffed with a lie. But I'm not even so sure there's a skin of the truth here. But let's go through it and dissect, talk about it rationally and, logically, hopefully, while still dealing with, the emotional impact, the real life issues that are being dealt with. Okay, let's do this. Ha! I think I was channeling Jimmy there.
So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests, everyone should get the same amount.
Equality suggests everyone should get the same amount. That is just a really weird way to say that in the context of what it's dealing with, which is life, basically. Is dealing with people's life. That equality means that, everyone gets the same amount of what? Like, that is just such a weird way to put it. Because I don't think that is what equality in this context suggests at all. What equality suggests, more than suggests, what equality is that by nature of being a human being, everyone has the same rights. And there's no difference between the great and the small, the weak and the strong. The rights are the same. And that is, all men are created equal. That's the equality in the context of life, and more particularly America here. There isn't like an amount thing, and the everyone should get kind of assumes a giver, with the people being a receiver. So I think we are starting out, and I think the video will bear out. It might seem like I'm making a leap here, but we are starting out, I believe, with Ms. Harris's fundamental presupposition that there's a benevolent giver, the government, that is overseeing society and doling out amounts, and everyone should be getting the same amount. That's really the only way I can take this, because certainly she can't be suggesting, that there's something, if you're atheistic, in nature that suggests in equality everyone would get the same amount in birth, or just before anything else in the state of nature, I guess the way you'd put it. She can presume to tell God, what God's going to give to people. But I believe this is presupposing the government, the benevolent giver that would give everyone the same amount, which makes no sense. And there's more I have to say on that, but I'd like to let the video continue a little bit.
The problem with that, not everybody's starting out from the same place.
Correct. Okay, that's the little bit of video I wanted to run. We're not. And you want to know what that's called? That's life. That's just reality. And that's just the way it is. And I'm not saying that to be cold-hearted. It is just an absolute fact that we are all born as individuals with certain advantages and disadvantages. And it isn't always things that are an amount per se, which is really presupposing here socioeconomic status in a way. But there are many other advantages and disadvantages. If, you could be born a very handsome man or beautiful woman, we all know there's something to the idea of pretty privilege. Is that fair? Is that the same amount of beauty? It's obviously a different amount of beauty to someone who isn't as attractive. Do you think equality suggests that that's somehow an affront to equality because not everyone is of the same attractiveness level? Or say intelligence level. You're born with a certain threshold, nature, nurture, diet, health can make some difference, but it's not going to make somebody of low intelligence a genius. It just doesn't work that way. Some people are born better singers. Some people are born athletes. In fact, the differences between people that don't have to do with things like, were you born to rich parents? Were you born in a functional family? Were you born in America, or were you born, in a third world country? There's many more differences than that, and they do affect the rest of your life. That is just life. The more cynical among us say life's a bitch and then you die. There comes a point where you just have to accept that some things are life, and then to view it in the most healthy way possible. But we will continue because I think she's viewing it in the most dystopian way possible.
So if we're all getting the same amount, but you started out back there and I started out over here, we can get the same amount, but you're still going to be that far back behind me.
Okay. Again, with the get the same amount, where in the world did that come from? Again, if we're not really talking about here money and certain kinds of perhaps career opportunities or education opportunities, because we're not even dealing with the opportunity to obtain things, because ultimately with this, we all know what this is about. It's about the argument of equality of outcome and equality of opportunity. Which of those is desirable? Which of those is fair? Which of those is doable? Which of those is most honoring to the human condition? There's a lot of questions to ask here. But the fact is, none of us will ever start from the same place. Even identical twins don't start from the same place, because the moment they start to have life experiences, things change. Say you have two identical twins, so they have the same family, the same genetics, the same environment, that probably very similar opportunities. But for instance, one of the twins has an unfortunate accident and breaks a leg or something that makes them not as capable. Just happens. Or let's get even a little bit more esoteric here. One of the twins unfortunately witnessed something very traumatic in their formative years. Maybe a terrible car accident or a murder or whatever, something that scarred them emotionally. Then there's a difference. So nobody ever starts from the same place. And there's not a thing we can do about that. Of course, this gets to, I believe, she's kind of simplifying all of that and saying, well, there are things we can do something about. But can you really? Is everything simply boiled down to something you could put as a calculation, to make everyone start from the same place? And who is to say that in the ultimate trajectory of someone's life, that starting from the same place is the best way to get them to their best? In other words, what I'm saying is there's something unique about humanity where sometimes we will not achieve our best without challenge. And I'm not saying that you have to, the worst challenge and you have to go through hell. But I am saying that there are people who are born into advantage that lack ambition or lack motivation because that just didn't ignite in them the want and the desire. And somebody with less advantage could grow and develop and become more to their potential because of that. That it wouldn't be doing that one particular person ultimately a favor to not have them have to strive for that. Now, I'm not being, so patronizing. Like, I could just imagine, some people go, oh, you should be lucky that you have that adversity. It's going to make you better. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying sometimes that's how it works out. It doesn't always work out that way. But sometimes it's how it works out. And we can't know. It's like the butterfly effect. I loved that movie because it showed how, well-intentioned one thing could lead to disaster. We're not God, and we can't play God. And I'm trying to think of, if you're not religious, just take that as just a certain expression. We're not the puppet master of society and people's lives, that we're the great equalizer. Certainly not. And when I say we, they, in that sense, I am referring to what I believe is Ms. Harris's fundamental presupposition of the government. Because at the end, I'll get back to we as individuals, but I'm referring to where she's, I believe, viewing a collective. And there's something else that's imported here that just is reinforcing a divide, is the best way to put it. Where she is, through the images, importing race into this. Because the person ahead is of lighter complexion and the person behind is of darker complexion, as if that's the way it always is. And it's not the way it always is. She's an example that it's not the way it always is. She has tremendous advantage. I'm a libertarian. I'm an individualist. I'm not going to be dealing with collectives. And it's a fact of life that someone of lighter complexion, born to a crack-addicted prostitute, has way more disadvantages in life than Ms. Harris, despite the fact that she has more melanin. Sometimes it's this way, and sometimes it's not. Now, that's not to say, if we were going to get into statistics, that there isn't an issue with poverty or whatever other disadvantage you can say that are targeted or consolidated in certain populations. And oftentimes it might be a minority community. Other times it's not. You look at sometimes the very, what our parents may have politically incorrectly called the hillbillies, which are white, predominantly white people. I'm sure there are Black people as well in those communities. I don't know that community very well, so I don't want to make presuppositions. But I have learned enough to know it's abject poverty and want and need. And listen, there's a reason there's an expression called white trash. And I'm not saying that's a right thing to say. What I am saying is that white people look down on other white people, because that exists in every group, however you want to group them. Let's continue.
It's about giving people the resources and the support they need.
In order to give somebody something, you have to have it to give. The government has nothing that it doesn't take from somebody else. That is a simple fact of life. The government produces nothing. It's easy to be generous with things you got from other people. So when you talk about, it's about giving resources. What that is saying, it's about redistributing resources, about taking resources, about creating, through taking, a disadvantage in someone else in order to give an advantage to someone who didn't have one before. She's focusing on this person doesn't have this, rather, which is a sleight of hand. So what happens where you say the quiet things out loud, it's also about, I'm going to just take something from somebody else. When, not if, because there definitely always will be. Even Jesus said the poor will be with us always. When there is disadvantage, is there a responsibility to assist? It depends upon how you define responsibility. So I'm going to say yes and no. And let me give you the no first. You can't be compelled to. There's some things in life where you have an absolute obligation to do or not do. And if you don't, force can legitimately be used against you. That is always a hard yes, hard no. So I mean an enforceable yes or no. So no, there's not an enforceable yes. But there is a moral yes that we should be helping and providing resources. That is what makes us human. But that's something that has to be done voluntarily and not by force. In fact, doing it by force impoverishes everybody. There is something quite humanifying, is not a word, but it's what's coming to mind. I don't know what word it is I'm seeking for, but I'm going to use humanifying. Something happens in our character and our spirit, both when we give and when we receive. And the government has impoverished all of us by taking on that role and making us step out of seeing that in some sense, yes, I am my brother's keeper. Yes, it is my personal responsibility that I can't farm off, that I have to face and take responsibility for it. Instead of going, oh my goodness, that disabled person is not getting the assistance they need. Boy, the government's not doing its job here. Let me vote harder. We've depersonalized and institutionalized assistance rather than it being one human spirit to another. And that's harmed us. And I believe part of the reason we see the absolute societal collapse where it's us and them and us and them, when it used to be a neighbor. And we see that spirit come out again for brief periods of time when there's a disaster. In the more rough days, and I'm not looking upon the past with rose-colored glasses, but there are things that were different in the past and better, and there certainly were things that were different in the past and worse. But the utter reliance upon each other, that there wasn't daddy government, was a reality then. And there were communities. Now we're lucky if we know our neighbors, and families don't stick together. And then you end up with the society where it's just normal to put mom in the nursing home. And some elderly people have, severe medical needs. Maybe that's the best place. But usually it's not. A lot of times it's not. Mom shouldn't be in the nursing home. She should be in the back bedroom. But this institutionalizing and distancing has what caused this. And this isn't about race. We need to stop making everything about that. We can acknowledge the problems that are there, but it's not that simple. And will we ever get to that point? I don't know. A large part of me is utterly convinced, and one part still has hope, but a large part of me is utterly convinced that what's happening to us with this, some of it is a manufactured racial divide and other is not, is just the curse of our founding. That you can't hypocritically found a country and say it's because all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights and have slaves. That we inflicted, we meaning Americans, past and present, inflicted a mortal wound at our birth, that we were doomed from the womb because of that hypocrisy that was a stench in the nostrils of God or of nature, however you want to put it, or of fate or of karma. I hope that's not the case, but we might just be reaping what we sowed, that this just was going to be inevitable. Or maybe it's just up to us to turn it around. And you don't turn it around the way things are being attempted today. You don't turn it around by further division. You don't turn it around by saying you're racist if you are colorblind, as they say. Nobody means literally by that you don't notice things about people. But you don't make your race your identity. You just don't. That is not the way. Continuing.
So that everyone can be on equal footing.
Impossible.
And compete on equal footing.
Right there. That's the hiccup. Because we all are watching this and, saying, well, she just wants everyone to be the same. But then uses the phrase compete. Competition means some people will be winners and some people will be comparatively losers. There will be first place, second place, and so on. That's what competition means. So that was kind of the hiccup. Like what? Compete on equal terms. Okay. Impossible in the way she's saying it, but utterly possible if we're talking about equality of rights and equality of opportunity, as imperfect as it sometimes is, that's the ideal. So I stopped and said, wait, that's starting to sound like equality, of opportunity. And if we took the government out of it and said, we really need to be lifting everybody up, okay. But when you're dealing with the government, you're not lifting everybody up, really. You're pushing down to lift up. Because again, the government can only give what it has taken from somebody else. Whereby voluntary human interaction, you're giving what is yours. It's not taken. You freely give it and help. But Now it's coming to the end, and we'll talk about the conclusions. Because at this point, when I first watched it, I was going, well, no, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. This isn't going where I thought it was.
Treatment means we all end up at the same place.
But she gave the conclusion. Equal treatment means that we all end up at the same place. Here's where I go, let's all sing together. One of these things is not like the other, right? Competition, and we all end up at the same place. It's incoherent. Those two do not live in the same universe. So what did she mean? I think the word competition was put in there to make it sound more palatable. But ultimately, that's not what she meant. Not in any sense, real sense of the word. And how can I know that? I'm not merely going simply by the words she said at the end, because maybe those were the sloppy words. She helpfully gave us a visual. And the people are climbing up the mountain, and they end up at the exact same spot on the pinnacle, looking out while she says those words. That it means we all end up at the same place. That's not competition. It's also not possible. Not all of us want to be at the same place. Being rich, for instance, is not what everybody wants. I like to say, listen, I love to sing. I'm a horrible singer. Should I end up at the same place because that's my desire as Barbara Streisand? Equality, here we go. Or are we just talking about money? What about smarts? And we kind of, in a sense, are doing this. There are people who, in a misguided attempt to balance things out, and I'm thinking specifically of certain members of the Asian community, that it's made more difficult for them to get into certain programs of higher, where it gets very competitive, because the schools are seeking to either have more women or have more this or have more that, when it needs to be about qualifications. Yes, it's admirable that we want to see more diversity, but also you can't do that at the expense of putting down, where they say, what's the new definition now? It's something about, I'm having a brain burp, but it's, you have to have the power to oppress. Only the oppressors can be racist, not the oppressed. Well, you want to know something? When you're kept out of something simply because you have the wrong skin color, that looks a little bit like oppression to me, and the people that are keeping whoever out have power. More qualified people, simply because they don't have the right ethnicity. That is frickin' racism. No, I don't buy that whole, no, it's not, there's no such thing as reverse racism, or else that wouldn't happen. And you don't right inequities by becoming the oppressor yourself. That's repaying evil for evil. Eye for eye leaves both men blind. The way this is being handled is not proper. No, we don't all end up at the same place. It's not possible, for one thing, but it's also not desirable. That is just not how we are wired. All of us strive for different things. All of us have different wants and needs. And the government cannot know that. Only we can. Get out of the way to let us make our own destinies. Stop thinking you're God and you're going to fix all the problems. And you're just going to vote in another this. We're going to give $5 billion or whatever it is to this. Where are you going to get it from? You're just going to shit it out? You either manufacture it which is stealing from everybody through inflation, or you steal it just directly. And you call it, and you don't do that and call yourself just. Thievery is thievery, no matter what flowery language you put upon it. But what is really funny is this is almost Poe's law. It's funny in a not funny way, not ha-ha funny, like, oh my God, funny, sad funny, ironic funny, how reality now is mimicking fiction that was almost a parody of dystopia, like Brave New World, right? Where I don't think the authors of these works, 1984, Brave New World, whatever one you might think of, that they literally thought, this is what the future looks like. And not just a parody, might not even be the right word, but it's almost like an exaggeration to shock the consciousness, which is what good art does, right? Well, in this tiny little vignette that Kamala Harris provided to us, she has recreated fiction. She is advocating for something that was portrayed in fiction to horrify us and show us the ridiculousness and the futility of this misplaced compassion. And to call it misplaced compassion is being charitable. Less charitable is a superiority God complex. But here is the dystopia that Ms. Harris is, in fact, advocating.
The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law. They were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because